The biggest bill in general aviation history, $50,000. Not for a new engine, not for an overhaul, for a bronze bushing the size of your thumb that Lycoming shipped out of spec for 12 years. On April 8th, the FAA told 45,152 engine owners to check their oil. What nobody told them is that checking their oil is the first step toward a bill that could exceed the value of the airplane. How does a $7 part generate a $50,000 invoice? $50,000. That's the number hitting Lycoming owners like a punch to the gut, not for a new airplane, not even for a factory engine, but for a bronze bushing that the FAA now says must be hunted down in more than 45,000 engines. The directive is stamped April 11, 2026. The part number is LWW13923. These are not just numbers on a form, they are the line items that turn a maintenance logbook into a financial crisis. The FAA calls it a compliance event. Lycoming calls it a service bulletin. But for anyone who has ever written a check for an engine reserve, these are the numbers that matter. $1,425 for the inspection, $2,170 to $6,850 for the rod job, all according to the Federal Register. On the shop floor, that is just the opening bid. Every invoice, every downtime day, every hour a Cessna or Piper sits idle. The real bill climbs far beyond any official worksheet. That airworthiness directive and that part number add up to a price that is whatever your airplane is worth, minus the cost of staying legal. For thousands of owners, a $7 bushing now stands between flying and a decision that could cost $40,000 or $80,000. This is not just a maintenance event. It is the biggest bill in general aviation history, and it starts with a single line on an FAA directive. The FAA's official worksheet spells out the numbers with clinical precision. $1,425 for the inspection, from $2,170 to $6,850 for the bushing replacement. These are the figures printed in the Federal Register, calculated with an $85 per hour labor rate, and a parts list that assumes nothing goes wrong beyond the bushing itself. For the 45,152 Lycoming engines now flagged in the registry, the agency's total compliance estimate lands around $48 million. On paper, it looks manageable. Just a line item for oil screen checks, a handful of bushings, a few hours of labor. But the cost model stops at the shop door. It does not account for what happens when the inspection triggers a teardown, or when downtime stretches from days to weeks. The FAA's math is scoped to the airworthiness directive, not to the real-world invoice. For an owner, the difference between $1,425 and $50,000 is not a rounding error. It is the gap between a scheduled oil change and a forced engine overhaul. The question is not whether the FAA's numbers are accurate, but whether they have anything to do with the bill that actually lands on an owner's desk. Every connecting rod inspection starts with a simple checklist, but the moment a mechanic cracks open the case, the math changes. Labor rates in 2026 do not care what is printed in the Federal Register. The going rate for major engine work runs anywhere from $115 an hour in rural shops to $150 an hour in metro areas. Even a straightforward bushing check can eat up 10 to 12 hours just to get to the part in question. That is before any secondary findings, scored lifters, camshaft wear, or borderline cylinder walls, make their way onto the invoice. Cylinder kits, which used to be a routine line item, now range from $1,200 to $2,300 each. If the teardown reveals a worn cylinder, the parts bill jumps fast. For a 4-cylinder Lycoming, the all-in overhaul price sits between $38,000 and $55,000, depending on shop, parts availability, and whether the engine qualifies for a standard rebuild or needs a factory exchange. The 6-cylinder IO540, common in Cessna 206 airplanes and Piper Saratogas, can top $80,000 if a core is rejected or a new engine is the only option. Every hour spent waiting for a part, every day the airplane sits idle, adds to the final tally. Rental costs for a replacement 172 hover near $150 a day. A flight school with 3 trainers out for overhaul can see $3,000 a week in lost revenue per aircraft. For a Part 135 operator, downtime is measured in charter hours missed and contracts at risk. The Federal Aviation Administration's worksheet assumes a best-case scenario: 1 bushing, minimal labor, no surprises. In the shop, real-world costs stack up differently. Each inspection that turns into a teardown becomes a fork in the road. Button up and risk flying another 100 hours on a marginal engine, or bite down and overhaul now, pulling a $40,000 to $80,000 expense forward by years. A mechanic's number on your caller ID in the middle of an annual is never a good sign. But when it comes during a Lycoming AD compliance, it often means the conversation is about to get expensive. The call rarely starts with the word overhaul, but it is always there, lurking behind phrases like found something or secondary findings. In 2025 FAA survey, data showed that 68% of these inspections uncovered cam or lifter wear, and 42% found cylinder issues that could not be ignored. The odds are not in your favor. Most shops, faced with a flagged bushing and visible cam wear, will not just button it up and send you flying. They will walk you through the numbers, an overhaul now or a gamble on flying to the next time between overhauls, knowing you will pay for the teardown all over again. The arithmetic gets brutal fast. A factory exchange on a 6-cylinder means a $64,000 core charge, and that is before you factor in the $150 a day your airplane sits idle. Even a routine shop overhaul can stretch downtime from 2 to 10 weeks, depending on parts availability and the shop's backlog. One missed delivery or a back-ordered cylinder kit adds thousands in rental costs or lost training revenue. For a flight school running 3 trainers, every week grounded is $3,000 in lost revenue per airplane. For a single owner, the downtime is not just a scheduling headache. It is money gone, reserves drained, and a hard look at whether the airplane is worth the repair. Every decision point in this process is a fork in the road between pushing a $40,000 to $80,000 overhaul forward by years or risking another season on worn internals. The FAA's worksheet does not price in the anxiety or the opportunity cost. It does not account for the 2 to 10 week lead times that can turn an inspection into a lost summer of flying. That phone call from the mechanic is where the AD's paper cost ends and the real accounting begins. Owners are not just paying for compliance, they are buying time, certainty, and a shot at keeping their airplane above water in a market where a maintenance event can erase years of equity overnight. A Cherokee owner opens the mail to find a compliance notice and a shop estimate that reads more like a ransom demand: $58,000. That is not for a new airplane, not even for a factory engine, just to make a 1979 4-seater legal again. After the connecting rod bushing airworthiness directive, the airplane itself books from $55,000 to $65,000 on VREF. The math is merciless. The bill can match or exceed the value of the asset it is supposed to protect. Reserve funds that were built up for a future overhaul get wiped out overnight. years ahead of schedule. On the other side of the field, a small flight school faces the same directive. Their archer, a bread-and-butter trainer, gets flagged for inspection. The shop quote lands at $63,000, but that is just the start. Every day the airplane sits, the school loses $250 and less in revenue. By the time the parts arrive and the engine is back in the air, the downtime alone has erased another $4,000. For a school with 3 trainers, the airworthiness directive can torch a season's profit and force hard choices about staffing, student schedules, even whether to keep the doors open. Neither owner is dealing in hypotheticals. These are real invoices, real logbook entries, real decisions about whether to keep flying or cut losses. The Federal Aviation Administration's worksheet says $1,425 to $6,850. The shop's invoice says $58,000, $63,000 or more. The difference is not a rounding error. It is the line between an airplane that flies and one that becomes a parts donor. For private pilots and school owners, the Bushing Airworthiness Directive is not just a compliance event. It is a forced reckoning with the economics of staying airborne. For commercial operators, the numbers do not just sting, they multiply. Consider a Part 135 charter company running 2 Lycoming-powered twins. The FAA worksheet still says $1,425 for the inspection, $6,850 if both rods need replacement. But that is just the first line of the ledger. When both engines land in the shop, the company faces a factory exchange bill of $78,000 per engine, no discounts, no core relief if the teardown finds internal damage. That is $156,000 before a wrench even turns on the airframe. Downtime is where the real bleeding starts. A charter twin grounded for 9 weeks is not just a scheduling headache. It is lost contracts, stranded clients, and a revenue vacuum. At a $210 daily charter rate, each airplane racks up $13,230 in missed income for every 9-week stretch. Multiply by 2, and downtime alone adds $26,460 to the bill. The total for this compliance event lands at $182,460, enough to buy a new Cessna 172 outright, or to wipe out a season's profit margin for a small operator. The chief financial officer does not see a bushing. They see a 6-figure liability that arrives by certified mail. Every day the aircraft sits idle, the opportunity cost grows. Unlike a private owner, a commercial operator cannot just wait out the parts delay or push the overhaul to next year. Charter contracts demand dispatch reliability, and any gap in service can mean losing key clients for good. What reads as a $7 part on a service bulletin becomes a $182,460 event on the balance sheet, forcing operators to choose between absorbing a catastrophic expense or risking non-compliance and lost business. The airworthiness directive's published numbers are a footnote. The real math is survival. A twin owner walks into the shop with both engines flagged for the airworthiness directive, and the numbers double on the spot. The FAA's worksheet still says $1,425 for the inspection, $2,170 to $6,850 for each rod job. But every line item, labor, parts, downtime, now hits twice. No discounts, no economies of scale. 2 engines mean twice the teardown, twice the risk of secondary findings, and twice the chance that at least one will need a full overhaul. The shop's estimate for a pair of IO360 engines quickly stacks up. $3,600 for both inspections, $4,340 for bushings if both are out of spec, and if both engines are near TBO. The overhaul bill leaps to $110,000 before you even factor in downtime. A real invoice from a Seneca owner in 2026 shows $95,000 for dual overhauls, plus $7,000 in lost rental revenue, while the airplane sat for 6 weeks waiting on parts. For a light twin, the airworthiness directive is not a maintenance line item. It is a 6-figure event that can push the airplane's value underwater. The reserve math is relentless. Every hour flown before the airworthiness directive was supposed to build equity for one overhaul, not 2 at once. Now, even a well-funded reserve can get wiped out overnight. For some twin owners, the only options are to pay the bill, ground the airplane, or sell it for parts. The airworthiness directive's official cost per engine is just a starting point. For twins, it is the multiplier that turns a compliance event into a financial reckoning. The connecting rod bushing crisis did not start with a single broken part or a dramatic engine failure. It began in the supplier's shop, sometime between 2009 and 2021, when out-of-spec bronze bushings rolled off the line and into Lycoming's assembly stream. For more than a decade, those bushings went into engines that now power over 45,000 airplanes. By the time the defect surfaced, most engines were already out of warranty. Lycoming's warranty window closed on July 26, 2018, years before the FAA's first directive named the problem. That left owners holding the invoice for a defect they could neither predict nor prevent. The FAA's regulatory filings are careful with language. Every airworthiness directive since 2017 has included the phrase, "no significant economic impact on a substantial number of small entities." The agency's economic worksheets list $1,425 for inspection and $2,170 to $6,850 for replacement. They never acknowledge the reality of overhaul acceleration or the fact that a teardown, once started, rarely stops at a single bushing. The worksheets are designed for the Federal Register, not for the owner's checkbook. Meanwhile, Lycoming's public statements direct owners to their shops, offering no retroactive warranty or cost share for engines beyond the cutoff date. The manufacturer's response is limited to service bulletins and case-by-case labor allowances, with no broad relief for the thousands left outside the warranty window. In contrast, when Continental faced its own crankshaft defect in 2023, it extended warranty coverage, shipped inspection kits, and covered both parts and labor for roughly 2,000 engines, earning praise from owners and AOPA alike. That difference is not just policy, it is a transfer of risk and cost from factory to owner. As the airworthiness directive's scope widened, from 16,000 engines in 2024 to over 45,000 in 2026, the number of orphan airplanes grew. VREF's valuation models now flag entire fleets where the cost of compliance rivals or exceeds the airplane's book value. Owners are left with a stark verdict: pay the bill, ground the airplane, or sell for salvage. The Federal Aviation Administration's worksheet calls it a compliance event. For owners, it is a forced reckoning over who pays when a supplier's defect outlasts the warranty and the regulator's math falls short. A $48 million bill doesn't leave much room for optimism, but there is one habit that still puts some control back into the owner's hands. For less than the price of a tank of avgas, an oil filter cutter, about $70 from any aviation supplier, turns every oil change into a 20-minute audit of your engine's financial future. It's not glamorous, but slicing open that filter and searching for bronze flecks can mean the difference between a scheduled overhaul and a forced teardown at the worst possible time. The economics are simple and brutal. Every Lycoming owner now faces a compliance window that could trigger a $50,000 engine event. But a careful filter inspection can buy time, sometimes hundreds of hours. by catching early signs of bushing wear before they become a regulatory emergency. The FAA worksheet says the inspection costs $1,425. In reality, that figure only holds if you're lucky enough to find nothing. If bronze is present, the clock starts ticking on a teardown, and the bill can erase years of reserve planning in a single phone call. A filter cutter and a disciplined inspection log are the last defense against an accelerated overhaul. For fleet operators, the practice scales. A line crew can check 10 filters in under 4 hours, catching problems before they cascade into lost revenue and grounded trainers. For single airplane owners, it's a way to budget for the real bill, not the one printed in the Federal Register. The numbers don't lie. A $70 tool and a 20-minute ritual can save tens of thousands, or at the very least, give you time to plan instead of react. In the world of forced compliance and vanishing warranties, prevention isn't just maintenance, it's financial survival. Today, the FAA calls it $1,425 inspection. For thousands of owners, it is a $50,000 invoice that lands years ahead of schedule. In every hangar, the math is relentless. Reserve funds dissolve, fleet values erode, downtime multiplies. This is where regulatory theory meets financial reality. Only those who price every risk, line by line, stand a chance. Stay sharp and watch your numbers.